All those great performances in just one film. I loved it. James Jones' book, From Here to Eternity, was later filmed as a 1979 miniseries and a short-lived regular series, but neither was a match for the original. One of the film's greatest advantages was the expression of new attitudes about the individual and society. All three heroes in this movie are rebels against the system. Pruitt is determined to go his own way, Maggio fights injustice in the military, and Warden bucks the system in his disdain for officers. This kind of individualism was groundbreaking stuff in the depiction of army men. As critic Pauline Kael observed, the film touched a social nerve. It also presented a new boldness towards sex in the relationship between Warden and Karen Holmes. The scene on the beach is so famous that the site where it was filmed has become a Hawaiian tourist attraction. And you have to know this scene's a classic because it's been parodied to death. Now for TVO highlights. But first, here's what's coming up on Saturday night at the movies.
Monty was an actor who lived parts like no actor that I've seen since. I mean, he really he boxed, and he was doing an awful lot of marching, and he learned how to fake the bugle. And I know all actors do these things, but I've never seen such intensity in a man and an actor as the way Clift was in preparing for this picture.
Burt Lancaster was at his most popular when he was playing men of action, but he was always on the lookout for thoughtful roles that took him into new areas. He was born Burton Lancaster in New York City in 1913 and died in 1994. He quit college to form an acrobatic act. After going into action in World War II, Lancaster went into acting and was spotted on stage by Hollywood scouts. He made his debut in The Killers, a brilliant 1947 adaptation of a story by Ernest Hemingway. His talent for acrobatics was in plentiful evidence in the 1952 The Crimson Pirate, one of his most playful pictures. Cast opposite Shirley Booth, he played a small-town drunk in Come Back Little Sheba, a 1952 rendition of William Inge's play. Lancaster had a triumph as the hero of Apache, a 1954 Western about the injustices suffered by Native Americans. One of his most distinctive roles was the gossip columnist in Sweet Smell of Success, an acrid drama with Tony Curtis. As the fraudulent preacher known as Elmer Gantry, Lancaster won an Oscar for Best Actor. In 1962, Lancaster played real-life criminal Robert Stroud, who became the Birdman of Alcatraz. It was directed by John Frankenheimer. One might have thought Lancaster wrong for the part of the Italian aristocrat of The Leopard in 1963, but he was perfect. Western fans loved The Professionals, Richard Brooks' 1966 adventure about a band of mercenaries with Lee Marvin and Claudia Cardinale. One of his most offbeat projects was Frank Perry's The Swimmer, a 1968 adaptation of a John Cheever short story. Lancaster had few words of praise for George Seaton's 1969 disaster movie Airport, but the public flocked in droves to see it. Nobody saw Alzana's Raid when it was released in 1971, but this Western is now highly praised for its look at warfare between cavalry forces and Indian tribes. Louis Malle directed the affectionate 1980 Canadian comedy drama Atlantic City, and Lancaster had one of his best later roles as an aging criminal. Bill Forsyth's 1983 Local Hero gave Lancaster a rare opportunity to test his hand at eccentric comedy. His last big hit was Field of Dreams in 1989. Lancaster played a veteran doctor in this fantasy, starring Kevin Costner. Always a vital performer, Burt Lancaster was one of the first actors to become producer. His company, Hecht Lancaster, set a standard for independent films. But moviegoers will always remember him for his electrifying grin and physical magnetism. Now we'll look back with Elwy Yost. This evening's guests include Montgomery Clift's brother Brooks Clift, critics Kenneth Turan, Stephen Rabello, and Charles Champlin, as well as Daniel Taradash, who scripted From Here to Eternity.
Back in the studio here with Montgomery Clift's brother, Brooks Clift. Brooks, how are you?
I'm still okay.
Still okay. You've got a couple of artifacts I'm dying to ask about. They were sitting there all through part one of the Brooks Clift interview, and I didn't get to them, but I want to now. What have you got there?
Well, this is my brother's flask.
Oh, my God.
EMC. And here's a very marvelous memorabilia, which is the barracks bag that Robert E.B. Pruitt carried in From Here to Eternity.
Oh, no.
Which is
That's interesting.
kind of
That's my God.
wonderful.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's fascinating.
We'll never part with this.
I guess I never will, Brooks. No.
Daniel Taradash, From Here to Eternity, has long been one of my favorite. Most people adore it, dealing with peace and war, war and peace. But the writing of that, the taking of the James Jones novel, which was a huge book, it weighed pounds and pounds and pounds. What do you remember about that? Which won you an Academy Award, sir?
Golly, what do I remember?
The doing
I remember
of that.
1,000 things. I wouldn't know where to start unless you can feed me a specific question.
Well, I could
maybe.
feed you a specific question. I was concerned about sitting down, actually working with the book, how Dan Taradash actually adapts the book. That's really what I was after, but we can get to Fred Zimmerman.
I'll tell you how I got the job. Let's put it that way. I was not a well-known Hollywood screenwriter at that time at all. Been on a couple of pictures, but nothing of extraordinary worth. I read the book the first time, and I just read it as a piece of material to read, although always in the back of a screenwriter's mind is, can that be a film? And I didn't see any possibility of making a movie out of it. And then about 2 or 3 months later, I read it again, and somehow it all hit me that it could not only make a movie, but a terrific movie, a really wonderful film. And I had an idea which was not in the book, and I think that idea got me the job. If you will recall, in the book, Maggio is sent to the stockade. We do not show the stockade, although it was one of the big sections of the book. And then he comes out of the stockade and dies in Prue's arms.
Right.
And Prue that night, Montgomery Clift played the part. For the first time, his famous bugler, who was not allowed to bugle because he wouldn't box, plays taps in the quadrangle where the men sleep in the barracks. So that was not in the book. In the book, Maggio didn't die. He fades out of the book in the middle of it and goes back to Brooklyn. He may have gotten a Section 8, a mental discharge, I don't remember. In the book, Pruitt picks up the bugle for no particular reason early in the piece and plays taps one night, which is very effective. The prose is beautiful. Jones wrote it marvelously, but there's no drama in it. And so when I said, that's my second act curtain, Maggio's not going back to Brooklyn. He's going to die from the beatings in the stockade, which we don't see, but which we are implied when you see how terrible he looks when he comes out, and escapes, actually. And then that night will be the night that Prue plays the bugle and plays taps. And when Cohen heard that, Harry Cohen and Buddy Adler, who was the producer of the film, and several others who had some authority at the studio, they said, that's better than anything we could have dreamed of. Go ahead, do the picture.
Well, this is a very entertaining film. It's almost like the version in its day of The English Patient. It's a big novel with a big cast, wide scope, very epic, really wonderful performances, and some of the scenes have gotten so famous that they ended up later being parodied. There's a wonderful parody that Sid Caesar did on Your Show of Shows, where the character that Montgomery Clift plays, he calls him Montgomery Bugle, because in the film he plays a bugle, and he kept saying, "A man is a trumpet," and they do this parody of the famous love scene between Deborah Carr and Burt Lancaster on the beach, where they're embracing and a wave kind of washes over them, and they're so passionate they don't even notice that the wave is at them. And there's a scene with Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca where they throw a bucket of water on them, and you can see the bucket. So it's a film that got so famous that it got to be parodied, but the original impetus, the original emotional qualities that made the film so strong are still visible today. This is, again, a film that audiences today will like as much as audiences then. This is a film that has not dated at all.
James Jones, who wrote the novel, wrote a treatment for the studio. And then the strange part of it, since we were talking about censorship a few moments ago, is that he ruined his novel in this treatment. He was so afraid of censorship that he changed every vital relationship from what it was in the book to some ridiculous kind of artificial nonsense. And they just threw the treatment away. It was impossible.
And then it was yours.
For example, I remember the captain's wife, whom Warden Burt Lancaster has an affair with. Jones changed the wife to the captain's sister. Well, now you have no movie, you have no story, you have no situation, or a very little one compared to what Jones really wrote when he wrote the novel.
It indicates some of the repressions of the times, though.
Yes, it does.
To motivate James Jones into doing that.
It's amazing,
That's
yes.
a very powerful insight you've given us.
And Jones was not that kind of a fellow. I don't know whether he was bewildered by Hollywood or what happened to him, but it was a very unhappy thing to read, actually, after you've read the book.
It's odd because the movie is often remembered because it's the movie that brought back Frank Sinatra. You know, that he did a dramatic role, and his career had been in the doldrums. He really fought to get the role. And he's wonderful in it, but you know what? I think he's overshadowed by Montgomery Clift. If you look at Clift's performance as Pruitt, it's staggering work. You know, it's really truly great acting, and the women in it are fantastic. Deborah Carr and Donna Reed playing a kind of just a complete turnaround for her, and she's wonderful at it. You know, just playing a sexually voracious woman who's as sexually voracious as the men are. That was something new for American movies in the 50s, and long overdue. And you know, because of I think Donna Reed's innate ladylikeness and niceness, it really comes across as even more shocking, but at the same time more palatable. And Deborah Carr, I mean, the same kind of thing. I mean, the famous scene of Burt Lancaster and Deborah Carr, you know, in those great bathing suits, you know, making love on the sand as the waves crash in. You know, I mean, to me, it's one of the movies that ruins you for love experiences because it's a measure. You know, if it's not that good, you know, then it probably isn't good at all. You know, I really think that movies, you know, feed our notions of what real sexuality and what real romance is, and that's just a great scene. I mean, it's been parodied in commercials in other movies, but you see the original and you go, God, that's great.